Something happened to me, and to this day I can't understand it. It was the day of my mother's funeral. Autumn in Vermont, that damp cold that clings to your skin and won't go away. The cemetery was on the outskirts of Brattleboro, an old place surrounded by pine trees that blocked the sunlight even in the middle of the day. It was drizzling. It wasn't a storm. It was that persistent drizzle that soaks everything without you even noticing. I was there, standing beside the closed coffin, listening to the priest read verses that meant nothing to me. My mother was never religious, neither am I, but the family insisted. Uncles, distant cousins, people I barely knew, all dressed in black, all silent. I should have been feeling something. Sadness, anger, guilt. But there was only emptiness, a cold hole in my chest. Maybe because in the last 6 months I had barely spoken to her. Work, distance, excuses. Always excuses. And then I saw the gravestone. It was there, beside the open grave. Gray granite, letters engraved in gold. I read the name. It wasn't hers. It was mine. My full name. Correct date of birth. And below, today's date. My heart raced. I looked around, searching for someone who could confirm the absurdity. My uncle was beside me, his face tired and his eyes red. I touched his arm. Uncle Robert. The tombstone. My voice came out weak, almost a whisper. He looked at me with a strange expression, not of surprise, of pity. I know, son. He squeezed my shoulder. But everything will be all right. You just need to accept it. Accept what? I looked at the others. My cousin Emily, my godfather, the neighbors. They all watched me with the same expression, as if they knew, as if it was expected. The priest continued the ceremony. No one corrected anything. No one seemed to find it strange. I was shivering, not from the cold. As the coffin began to descend, I felt something I can't describe, a pressure in my chest, a weight, as if something was pulling me down with it. And that's when I heard it, a low, muffled sound, coming from inside the earth, as if someone were breathing. I went home as soon as the ceremony ended. I didn't go to the wake. I couldn't be near those people, looking at me like that, as if I were fragile, broken, or worse, as if I wasn't really there anymore. My apartment was 20 minutes from the cemetery, in an old building in downtown Brattleboro. 3rd floor, no elevator. The stairs creaked. They always creaked. But that day, each step seemed to echo louder. I went inside, locked the door, and stood there in the dark hallway. Silence. I tried calling my best friend, Sarah. She always answered, always. But the phone rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I tried again, nothing. I sent messages, no response. I called my boss, straight to voicemail, for my brother. Same result. It was as if no one else could see me anymore. I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There was food there. Things I had bought 2 days ago. But looking at it, a container of yogurt, fruit, leftover pizza, I felt something was wrong. I didn't remember eating anything in the last few days. He didn't remember sleeping properly. In fact, when was the last time I felt hungry? I closed the refrigerator and went to the bathroom mirror. My reflection was there. Normal, tired, pale, sunken eyes. But there. So why did everything seem so distant? I sat on the sofa and picked up my phone. I opened the photos. I looked for the last picture of my mother. There it was, 3 months ago, on her birthday. She was smiling, holding a piece of cake. I was next to her, my arm around her shoulders. But when I looked again, I wasn't in the photo anymore. It was just her, alone, smiling at the camera. My breath caught in my throat. I moved on to the next photo. Same thing. I had disappeared. From the 3rd photo, from the 4th, from all of them. I threw my phone on the sofa and stood up. dizzy. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks on the door. Slow. Steady. I went there and looked through the peephole. Nobody. But the knocking continued. From the other side. As if someone were standing there. Invisible. I opened the door suddenly. The hallway was empty. But on the ground, right in front of the door, there was fresh soil. And the smell. That smell of a cemetery. Wet earth. Wilted flowers. Death. I closed the door slowly, locking it twice. I leaned against her, trembling. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to go back to the cemetery. I needed to see that gravestone again. Because if my name really was there, so who was buried in that grave? I waited until midnight. I don't know why I waited so long. Maybe because I was afraid of what I would find. Or maybe because, deep down, a part of me already knew. I got in my car and drove to the cemetery. The streets were deserted. Brattleboro at night is like that. Silent, empty, as if the whole city had died along with the sun. The fog had thickened. It crept over the asphalt, covering everything. I parked outside the gate. It was locked, but the fence was low. I jumped over without difficulty. The cold was different inside. Heavier, damp, as if the air were soaked in something other than water. I started walking. The cemetery was larger than I remembered. Endless rows of tombstones, some old, covered in moss, others recent, with withered flowers still placed on them. My steps sank into the damp earth. Each movement made a muffled, sticky sound. And then I heard it. Steps. They weren't mine. They came from behind. Slow. Steady. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I turned slowly, looking back. Nothing. Just fog and darkness. I kept walking, faster now. My heart was pounding, irregularly. I knew the way. I'd unintentionally memorized it during the funeral. 3rd row on the left, near the old oak tree. There it was, the camp. But something was wrong. The earth around it was churned up, as if someone had been digging, and the gravestone. My name was still there. But now there was something more. Below the date, engraved in crooked letters, almost scratched into the stone, "Welcome back." My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, tripping over something. I looked down. The grave was open. Not completely, just a crack. Enough to see the darkness inside. And the smell. God, that smell. It wasn't decay. It was something older, deeper. And then I heard it. Breathing. Coming from inside the grave. Slow. Heavy. Like someone who just woke up. I took another step back, but my body was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Something moved down there. A sound of fingernails scratching wood. Then, silence, and a voice, low, hoarse, too familiar. "You took too long." It was my mother's voice. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. I stood there, frozen, staring at that crack in the ground. "Mom?" My voice came out broken, almost inaudible. The silence that followed was worse than any answer. Then I heard it again. Movement. Something dragging. Slow. Deliberate. And the voice returned, clearer now. "You never came to visit me." Not even when I was still alive. My chest tightened. Guilt. That guilt I had buried as deep as any body. I couldn't finish. Lies. The voice was closer now, as if it were rising. "You've always been good at lying. To me. To yourself." The crack began to widen. Earth fell in, revealing more of the darkness. And then I saw one hand, pale, dirty with soil. Long fingers, broken nails. She clung to the edge of the grave. I took a step back, stumbling again. falling on my back in the mud. My body finally reacted. I started crawling backward, my eyes fixed on that hand. Another hand appeared, then the head. But she wasn't my mother. It was me, my face, my eyes, my mouth, but wrong, distorted, as if it had been assembled by someone who had never seen a real human. I looked at me, and she smiled. "Do you think you can get away with what you did?" The voice was still my mother's, but coming from my own mouth. "You left her to die alone." No. I didn't know she was doing so badly. Tears streamed down my face. "You knew." He began to emerge from the grave slowly, crawling across the earth. "You just didn't want to see." Memories exploded in my head. The calls I ignored. The messages I left unanswered. The last time she asked me to visit her, and I said I was busy, always busy. She called you the night she died. The creature was standing now, covered in dirt, staring at me. You saw her name on the screen, and you hung up. My stomach churned, because it was true. I remembered now. I remembered everything. The phone rang at 3 a.m. His name flashed on the screen, and I pressed the red button. I'll call back later, I thought. I need to sleep. But there was nothing after that. When I woke up, she was already gone. The creature approached. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "You didn't come to her funeral," he whispered, now inches from my face. "You came to yours." And then everything made sense. The gravestone, people acting strangely, my name engraved in stone. I wasn't at my mother's funeral. I was minding my own business. The creature touched my face with icy fingers. It's time to accept it. And everything went dark. I woke up in my apartment. Sunlight streamed through the window. The clock struck noon. My body ached as if I had been beaten. My clothes were soiled with dirt. For a moment, I thought it had been a nightmare. A nervous breakdown caused by grief. I had gone to the cemetery, fainted, and returned home. Just like that. But then I looked at my hands. There was dirt under her fingernails. Dirt that shouldn't have been there. I got up, stumbling to the bathroom. I washed my face and looked in the mirror. It was still there. My reflection. Normal. But when I blinked, for a fraction of a second, I saw something else. That distorted face. Those empty eyes. I stepped back, breathless. I grabbed my phone. I needed to talk to someone. Anyone. I opened the contact list. It was empty. All the names had disappeared, all the conversations, all the photos. It was as if I had never existed. I tried to leave the apartment. The door wouldn't open. I turned the key, pulled the handle. Nothing. It was locked from the outside. I went to the window. I looked out at the street. It was deserted. There were no cars. There were no people. Just that dense, white fog covering everything. And then I saw, across the street, someone standing still, looking up, at me. It was me. That version. The one that had been climbed out of the grave. He nodded. Slowly. I stepped back from the window, my heart racing. I ran to my room and locked the door. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees. I tried to think. I tried to find a rational explanation. But there wasn't one. Because deep down, I knew. I had died that night. When I hung up the phone. When I chose to sleep instead of answering my mother. Something inside me died there. And what remained was no longer human. It was all guilt, remorse, emptiness. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, heavy, coming towards my room. The doorknob began to turn. I looked around in despair, There was no way out. There was nowhere to run. The door opened, and there he was. It's time to accept it, he repeated, in that voice that was both mine and my mother's at the same time. Accept what? I shouted, tears streaming down my face. He came closer and knelt in front of me. That you're no longer here. He touched my chest. You're just an echo, a memory that refuses to fade. I felt my body become lighter, as if it were dissolving. I looked at my hands. They were becoming transparent. No, I whispered. Everything's fine. He smiled, and this time, the smile was almost gentle. She's waiting for you. And then I heard it. My mother's voice, real, soft. It's time to come home, my son. The walls began to disappear. The light grew brighter, whiter, and I stopped fighting, because maybe he was right. Perhaps I've been dead for a long time already, and that was just the final part. Acceptance. Today, if you pass by the Brattleboro Cemetery, you will find a gravestone with my name on it. And if you pay attention, you'll hear it. One breath, coming from beneath the earth. Waiting, always waiting. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't understand it. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm a photographer. I've worked alone for years, documenting old buildings, forgotten heritage sites, places no one else looks at. It's solitary work, but I've always preferred it that way. Fewer people, fewer questions, less connection. It was in October when I received the email. The City Hall of Ashford, a small town in rural Montana, needed someone to document the St. Benedict Municipal Cemetery. Nothing too complicated. Decent pay, flexible deadline. I accepted without much thought. The cemetery was on the edge of town, surrounded by tall pine trees and a stone wall that looked like it had been built a century ago. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was heavy, that kind of heavy cloud cover that makes the day seem shorter. The wind cut through my skin. The caretaker led me to the gate of the northeast section. It was an area isolated from the rest of the cemetery, separated by a rusty iron fence. This sector was abandoned in the 80s, he said, looking at the ground as he spoke. Nobody comes here, not even for maintenance. Why? I asked, adjusting the camera. He took a while to answer. Nobody knows who's buried here. There are no records. There are no names on the tombstones. Nothing. I looked inside. Dozens of simple graves, covered by low vegetation, grey stones, all the same, all empty. No names, no dates, no flowers. Will you be okay alone? He asked, already backing away. I always stay. He locked the gate behind me and left. The sound of his footsteps faded away too quickly. I stood there, alone among the nameless graves. The silence was wrong. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was as if the place swallowed any noise. Not birds, not insects, only the wind, low and constant, passing through the stones. I started taking photographs, wide shots, details of the tombstones, low angles to capture the texture of the stones against the grey sky. Technical, methodical work. That's what I did. That's what I was good at. But something was bothering me. The temperature. It was too cold. It wasn't just the wind. It was a chill that came from below, from the ground, as if the earth were exhaling ice. My hands trembled as I held the camera, and there was something else. A feeling. You know when you feel like someone is looking at you, but when you turn around, there's no one there. It was like that, all the time, as if the tombstones were watching me. I shook my head. Nonsense. Tiredness. Loneliness. I was used to it. I took about 50 more photos and packed up my equipment. The light was fading. The sky was almost black now, and the wind had gotten stronger. I called the caretaker on my cell phone. It took him 20 minutes to come back and open the gate. I went straight to the motel. I grabbed my laptop, transferred the files, and started reviewing the photos. Everything normal. Stones, earth, vegetation, shadows of dusk. I turned off my computer and went to sleep. But when I woke up in the middle of the night, breathless and with my heart racing, I knew something was wrong in that place. I couldn't sleep properly. I woke up at 5 in the morning with the bedside lamp still on and my laptop open on the bed. I had forgotten to turn it off. I made coffee. I sat at the motel's little table. I opened the photos again. At first, everything seemed the same. Stones, dry grass, heavy sky. Nothing out of place. But then, I saw, in the 12th photo, a dark blur behind one of the tombstones. Small, almost imperceptible. I thought it was dirt on the lens. I moved on to the next image. The blur was bigger, more defined, closer. My stomach tightened. I went back to the previous photo. I zoomed in. The shadow was there. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't blur. It was a shape, vertical, as if someone were standing behind the rock, but not completely solid. I moved on to the next photo. The shadow had moved. It was 3 graves closer. No, that doesn't make sense. I started flipping through the photos quickly, one after the other. The shadow moved forward. In each image, it was closer to where I was when I took the picture. And it wasn't just one. There were others, 4, 5, 6 different shadows, all moving towards me. My breathing was rapid. I closed my laptop. I stood up. I walked to the window. The street was empty. The sky was still dark. "It's a technical error," I said aloud, just to hear my own voice. "Long exposure, camera shake, something like that." But I knew it wasn't. I opened the laptop again. This time, I went straight to the last photos of the session. The ones I had taken when the light was almost dead, when the cold had become unbearable, when I felt that presence. I enlarged the image. I adjusted the contrast. And then I saw the faces. They weren't complete faces. They were suggestions. Dark ovals where heads should have been. No eyes, no mouth. But the shape was unmistakable. Human figures, still, turned towards me. All of them. I counted 12 shadows in the last photo. All of them pointing to the exact spot where I was. I slammed the laptop shut so hard I almost broke the screen. My heart was pounding. I got up again. I paced around the room. I turned on the TV. I turned it off. I drank more coffee. My hands were shaking. No, that's not happening. I spent the day trying to distract myself. I watched TV. I read emails. I tried editing other old photos. But my mind always returned to those shadows, to those featureless faces. Late in the afternoon, I made a decision. I was going to come back. I was going back to the cemetery. I was going to take new photos. I was going to prove to myself that it was a mistake, a technical glitch, a defect in the camera or in my head, anything but what I was thinking. I got my equipment. I checked everything twice. Lens clean, settings correct, battery full, everything perfect. I drove to the cemetery. The caretaker wasn't there. I called him. He said he could let me in, but only for an hour. It was getting dark. "I won't be long," I lied. He opened the gate to the northeast sector. He looked at me strangely, as if he wanted to ask me something, but was afraid of the answer. "Be careful in there," he said, and left. The gate closed behind me, and silence returned. Heavier this time, closer. I started taking photographs. Methodical, professional. But this time, I looked around between each click. I searched. I hoped to see something. Anything. Nothing. Just rocks. Just grass. Just cold wind. But the discomfort was still there. Greater now. As if the air had become denser. As if something were pressing on me from all sides. I took another 30 photos. I stopped. I took a deep breath. And then I made the mistake. I opened the photos on the camera. Right there. In the middle of the cemetery, I enlarged the first image. The shadows were there. All of them. Closer than before. And all the tombstones, all the graves, were oriented in my direction. It wasn't possible. They weren't like that when I arrived. I was sure of it. But in the photos, it was clear. All the graves, facing me. I dropped the camera. I almost let it fall to the ground. My heart raced. I looked around. The tombstones were in the same position as always. Aligned. Perpendicular to the path. Normal. I picked up the camera again. I reviewed the photo. In the photo, all the stones were facing where I was, as if they had turned, as if they were staring at me. No, that's not happening. I took another picture, quickly. I opened it on the screen. Same thing. The graves were oriented towards me. In the photo. Only in the photo. My breathing was rapid, shallow. The cold had become unbearable. I could feel it in my bones now, as if I were freezing from the inside. The wind stopped completely. And the silence was deafening. I took a step back, then another. I bumped into something. I'll turn around quickly, nothing. Just a tombstone, a gray, nameless stone. But I swore I wasn't there before. I started walking, fast, toward the gate. My footsteps echoed, but something was wrong. The echoes didn't match. It was as if there were more footsteps, not just mine. I stopped. The echoes continued for another second. My stomach churned. I didn't look back. I just ran. I arrived at the gate and called the caretaker. My voice was trembling. He took 15 minutes, the longest 15 minutes of my life. I stood there, my back to the gate, staring at the abandoned area. I didn't see anything move, not a shadow, not a single movement. But the feeling of being watched was so strong, it hurt. When the caretaker finally arrived, I was already sweating profusely despite the freezing temperature. "Are you all right?" he asked, opening the gate. "Yes. I'm done. I'm not coming back." He didn't say anything. He just looked at the abandoned area, and then at me, with an expression I couldn't decipher. I went back to the motel. I locked the door. I closed the curtains. I turned on all the lights. I sat on the bed with my laptop. I started reviewing the new photos, one by one. The shadows were closer, much closer. In some photos, they were less than 3 meters from where I was. And now I could see details. They weren't just silhouettes. They were almost human forms, long arms, tilted heads, and where the faces should have been, there were holes, emptiness, pure darkness. I enlarged one of the images. I adjusted the brightness, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. In one of the shadows, in the chest area, there was something written, dark letters against the darkness, almost invisible. I strained my eyes. A name. I couldn't read it completely, but the first letter was clear. It was the same letter as my name. I closed the laptop. I breathed. I tried to calm down. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe... My phone vibrated. A notification has been received. Automatic photo backup completed. I opened the gallery. The cemetery photos were there. All saved. all synchronized. But there was one more photo, a photo that I hadn't taken. Expand. It was the cemetery. At night. Completely dark, but in the center of the image, illuminated by a light I couldn't identify, there I was, back turned, standing between the tombs, alone, and all around me, in a circle, were the shadows, watching me. I threw my phone on the bed as if it were on fire. I got up. I paced back and forth. My breathing was erratic. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. I looked at my phone. The screen was still lit. The photo was still there. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. I opened the image details, date, time, location, today, 6:47 p.m., São Benedito Municipal Cemetery. That was exactly the time I was there. But I hadn't taken that picture. I was absolutely sure, so who took it? I deleted the image. Immediately, I emptied the recycle bin. I checked the cloud backup. I deleted it from there too. I confirmed 3 times. I collapsed onto the bed. I ran my hands over my face. I needed to think. I needed to understand. It's a hack. Someone hacked my phone, or I'm having a nervous breakdown. Any explanation would be better than the alternative. I opened the laptop again. I went straight to the last photos I had taken, the photos I knew were mine. I started analyzing each one, maximum zoom, pixel by pixel. First photo, 5 shadows, distant. Second photo, 7 shadows, closer up. Third photo, 9 shadows, almost within my reach. And then, in the 12th photo, I saw it. Faces. They were no longer just empty holes. They were featureless faces, but with intention, tilted, turned towards the camera, towards me, as if they were waiting, studying. I counted the shadows. 12. Exactly 12. I went back to the photos from the first day. I counted the nameless graves in the abandoned section. Does. No. I opened the editing software. I isolated each shadow. I increased the contrast to the maximum. And then I saw what was written on each one of them. Names. Names etched in darkness. Ancient names. Foreign names. Some that I couldn't even pronounce. One less. The closest shadow. The one that was less than 2 meters from where I was when I took the photo. Expand. I adjusted the brightness. Yes. My name. My full name. Written in letters that looked as if they had been scratched into their own shadow. My vision blurred at the edges. I felt nauseous. I slammed the laptop shut. I pushed it away. I stood up. I went to the bathroom sink. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale. Deep dark circles under my eyes. Red eyes. "You're freaking out," I said to my reflection. "You haven't slept. You're stressed, that's all." But I didn't believe in myself. I went back to the room. I looked at the closed laptop, at the cell phone, at the camera on the table. I needed to check one last thing. I picked up the camera. I opened the menu. I went to the information for the last file. Metadata complete. File name, IMG 2847, CR2 date, today. Time, 6:52 p.m. And then I saw something that made my world crumble. Automatic caption generated by the camera. Portrait, my full name. But I hadn't set up automatic captions. I've never used that feature. And that photo wasn't a portrait. It was a landscape, an empty cemetery. At least, that's what I thought I had photographed. I opened the image on the camera screen. I zoomed in. And this time, in the center of the photo, almost transparent, almost invisible, it was me, not from behind, from the front, looking directly at the camera, with completely black eyes. I dropped the camera. It hit the floor with a dry thud. The screen cracked. My legs gave way. I sat on the floor. I leaned against the headboard. I hugged my knees. I started trembling, not from the cold, from pure terror, because now I understood. The cemetery was not abandoned. He was waiting, and somehow, I was already a part of it. I didn't leave my room for 3 days. I locked the door. I pushed the dresser against it. I closed the curtains. I turned off my cell phone. I covered the camera with a sheet, as if she could see me. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those featureless faces, those tilted shadows, my own face with empty eyes staring back at me. On the 3rd day, I decided to delete everything. I turned on the laptop. I selected all the photos from the cemetery, all of them. I pressed delete. I confirmed. I emptied the recycle bin. I formatted the memory card. I deleted the cloud backup. I uninstalled the application. I took a deep breath. It was done. I closed my laptop. I lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes. 2 hours later, I woke up to a notification. I picked up my phone without thinking. The screen was lit. Upload complete. 1 new photo. My blood ran cold. I opened the gallery with trembling hands. There it was. A new photo, taken today, 20 minutes ago. It was the motel room, seen from above, as if someone were floating on the ceiling, and in bed, under the covers, there I was, sleeping. I put down my phone. I looked at the ceiling. Nothing. Just the peeling white plaster. Nothing else. But the photo was there. Real. Undisputed. I got up. I put on the first clothes I found. I grabbed my backpack. I left everything behind. The camera, the laptop, the cell phone, everything. I went to the reception. I paid the bill. I got in the car. I drove non-stop. Far from Ashford, far from the cemetery, far from that cursed place. I drove for 8 hours. I stopped in a town whose name I don't even know. I rented another room. I bought a new cell phone. I tried to start over, but it was no use. Because 4 days later, in the middle of the night, I woke up with the feeling that I wasn't alone. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but not completely. There was a faint light coming from somewhere. I turned my head. My cell phone was on the bedside table. The screen was lit. Alone. I picked up my phone. I had a new notification. 1 photo received via airdrop from unknown. I didn't accept it. I rejected it. I turned off my cell phone. I ripped out the battery. But when I woke up in the morning, the photo was saved in the gallery. I opened it trembling. It was me, again. But this time, I was in the cemetery, standing between the nameless graves, facing the camera, arms at his sides, motionless, and behind me, in a row, all the shadows. I enlarged the image. I looked at my face in the photo. My eyes were empty, black, like theirs. And below the photo, in the automatic caption, it said, "Welcome home." I dropped my cell phone. I can't delete the photos anymore. They keep coming back. They always come back, no matter how many times I try, no matter how many devices I switch between. And now they're not just photos of the cemetery. These are photos of me, sleeping, walking down the street, sitting in cafes, always taken from impossible angles, always with that strange light, always with shadows in the background. Sometimes, at night, I feel the cold, that cold that comes from below, that cemetery cold. And I hear footsteps in the hallway, footsteps that stop at my door and stay there, waiting. I still don't know what they want, or maybe I do. Maybe I've always known. The cemetery was not documenting the dead. He was cataloging the next ones. And my name was already there. Among the nameless graves, I was just waiting for myself to realize it. Now, every time I pick up a camera, every time I look at a screen, I see it. The shadows, always closer, always watching me. And the last photo I received was taken last night. It's me, in the cemetery, lying down, in an open grave, with a blank tombstone above my head. And now I know. I've always been among the nameless graves. I was just waiting for my turn to go to bed. Something happened to me at a funeral, and to this day, I don't know if I really left there. I've been driving for Uber for 3 years. Night shifts, always. Less traffic, less conversation, more money. That night, it was almost midnight when I accepted a last-minute ride. The app showed a strange destination, Riverside Memorial Chapel, an old funeral chapel in the suburbs of Portland. The passenger boarded in silence. An older man, dark suit, strong smell of tobacco. He didn't say a word the entire way, neither did I. I prefer it that way. When we arrived, it was raining heavily. He got out of the car without paying, without looking back, and went straight in through the side door of the chapel. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I was tired, angry, but I needed that money. I got out of the car, covered my head with my jacket, and went to the entrance. The door was ajar. I went in. The place was older than I had imagined. Dark wood walls, weak chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, cracked white tiles on the floor, a thick smell of wilted flowers mixed with candle wax. The hallway was long and too quiet. Finally, the main chapel, empty, completely empty, except for the coffin. It was in the center, surrounded by half-dried floral arrangements, candles still lit in tall candelabras. The coffin was made of dark wood, the lid closed. No name visible, no photo, no plaque. I looked around. Folding chairs were scattered, some overturned. Disposable coffee cups lay forgotten on a side table. It seemed like everyone had left in a hurry. "Is anyone here?" I called. Nothing. My voice echoed in a strange way, as if the place were bigger than it actually was. I pulled out my cell phone. No signal. Excellent. I thought about leaving, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the idiotic upbringing my mother gave me. Maybe it was guilt. It had been 3 years since I'd been to a funeral, since my father's. I swore I'd never set foot in a place like that again. But there I was. I approached the coffin slowly. The candles trembled, but there was no draft. The rain beat against the high windows, rhythmic and heavy. I stopped 2 meters away. I don't know why, but I started praying. "Our Father who art in heaven." My voice came out low, automatic, words I hadn't said in years. I don't know if I still believed them, but they came out. "Hallowed be thy name." And then I heard it, a whisper. Weak, distant, but it was there. I stopped. Silence. I continued. "Your kingdom come." The whisper returned, clearer now, as if someone were repeating after me. My heart raced. I looked around. Nothing. Nobody. "Thy will be done." This time, the whisper, he continued alone, even after I stopped. "As above, so in heaven." I wasn't speaking anymore, but the voice continued. Freezing, I took 2 steps back. The candles all trembled at once, as if something had passed between them. And that's when I realized the sales were still too high. For a wake that should have ended hours ago, they were newly accessed. I stood there, trying to breathe slowly. My brain struggled to find a logical explanation. Maybe someone had switched the candles before leaving. Maybe they were those long, slow-burning candles. Maybe. But the whisper, that was inexplicable. I took another step back, without taking my eyes off the coffin. The dark wood seemed to absorb the candlelight instead of reflecting it. There was something wrong with that object, something my body knew before my mind accepted it. I turned to leave. The chapel door was closed. I had left it ajar, I'm sure of it. I always leave doors open when I enter empty places. It's instinct. I walked over there quickly and turned the doorknob. Locked. I tried again. Nothing. I pushed with my shoulder. The door didn't budge an inch. "Hey!" I shouted. "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed down the hallway, but no one answered. I banged on the door 3 times. The wood was heavy and old. My fingers ached. I took a deep breath, trying to think. There had to be another way out. There always is. I turned to explore the place, but then steps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside. Tuck, tuck, tuck. I pressed my ear against the door. "Hey, I'm locked in here. Open this door." The footsteps stopped. Silence. And then, very quietly, almost imperceptibly, a whisper from the other side of the door. I couldn't understand the words. It was as if they were speaking backwards, or in a language I almost recognized, but not completely. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I would have liked. The whispering stopped. The footsteps began again, faster now, moving away. "Wait!" I punched the door again, but the footsteps disappeared at the end of the hallway. I lay there, breathless, my forehead pressed against the cold wood. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I needed to get out. I needed to get out, now. I turned to look for a window, anything. But my eyes fell back on the coffin. He was closer. I know how that sounds. I know. But I swear on everything the coffin was closer than before. Not much. Maybe half a meter. But close enough for me, to be sure. That's how he moved. My stomach churned. I leaned against the door, my legs weak. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. You're tired. Tired and stressed. This isn't real. It can't be real. I closed my eyes for a second, and I heard it again. The whisper. But this time it wasn't coming from the hallway. Vineyard inside the chapel. I opened my eyes. The candles remained lit. But now they all trembled together. In sync. As if they were breathing. The whisper grew louder. It wasn't a voice. It was several overlapping. Out of tune. Like a distant choir singing something I couldn't understand. And then, clearly, one word. My name. My full name. Pronounced slowly, with pauses between syllables. My blood froze. "Who's speaking?" My voice came out shaky, broken. The whispering continued. Now it came from low from the ground. I looked at the cracked white marble floor beneath my feet. The sound seemed to be coming from several places at once, as if something was happening. Beneath the chapel, something big, moving. The voices whispered my name again, and again, and again, until they all stopped at the same time. And then, a single voice, clear, cold, directly beneath me. "You've been here before." My whole body was trembling. It wasn't possible. I had never been there before. Never. I didn't even know this place existed until half an hour ago. But the voice continued, repeating itself, as if it were waiting for me to answer. You've been here before." I backed up until I was against the wall, away from the center of the chapel. My breathing was rapid, uncontrolled. I needed to get out. I needed to find another door, a window, anything. I looked around desperately. There was a small door in the left corner, half hidden behind a wilted flower arrangement. I ran over there and turned the doorknob. Locked. I hit it with the palm of my hand. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. "Get me out of here!" I yelled, but my voice vanished into thin air. The voices from beneath the floor began again, louder now. They weren't just whispers. They were murmurs. It was as if dozens of people were talking at the same time, all talking about me. I covered my ears with my hands, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't there. Outside, it was getting into my skin, into my bones. I fell to my knees in the middle of the chapel, my breath caught, my hands clutching my head. The words began to form, one by one, rising from the floor, as if they were emerging from a deep well. You promised. You're back. You always come back. I didn't promise anything, I yelled at the ground. I don't know this place. The voices stopped. Total silence. Only the rain hitting the windows. Slowly, I raised my head. The candles were still flickering. The coffin remained there, motionless, somber, waiting for me. I don't know what gave me courage or desperation, but I dragged myself to him. I needed to understand. I needed to see. I stopped beside the coffin, my hand trembling as I reached for the lid. Cold wood, smooth, no inscription. I touched the edge with my fingers, and that's when I felt it. Vibration. The wood was vibrating. I pulled my hand back, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't my imagination. Something was vibrating inside that coffin, something that... He was not dead. I took 2 steps back, and that's when I heard it again. The whisper. But this time, it didn't come from below. Vineyard inside the coffin. Weak, muffled, like someone trying to speak through a pillow. I froze it. The voice called my name. He didn't whisper. He called clearly, familiarly, as if he knew me. My knees buckled. I fell seated on the cold floor, my back to the coffin, my hands trembling violently. Hot tears streamed down my face without me realizing it. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. But it was, and deep down, in a dirty and forgotten part of my mind. You knew. I had heard that voice before. I just couldn't remember where. The chapel lights flickered, once, twice, and then, for a single second, they completely erased it. When they returned, I was no longer alone. There were wet footprints on the ground, footprints that weren't mine. They began at the front door, crossed the entire chapel in a straight line, and ended under the coffin, as if someone had entered, walked over there, and descended. My throat closed up. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The voices returned, all at once, coming from all sides, from the floor, from the walls, from the ceiling. Disc! 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 And then the coffin began to creak. The lid moved, just a little, enough for me to see a dark gap between the wood and the edge, and from within that crack, a final whisper emerged. Welcome back. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, staring at that dark crack in the coffin. Seconds, minutes, maybe hours. Time had ceased to make sense. The lid didn't budge anymore. It stayed there, slightly open, like a mouth waiting to swallow anything that came near. I needed to leave. Now. I crawled backward, without taking my eyes off the coffin, until I reached the opposite wall. My hand groped along the cold surface until it found the doorknob of a side door I hadn't seen before. Grey. It opened. I almost cried with relief. On the other side was a narrow, dimly lit hallway that smelled of mold and old paint. I didn't care. I went in and closed the door behind me, leaning my back against it, as if my weight could keep it shut. I breathed. I tried to calm down. You're okay. You'll get out. You just need to find your way out. I started walking down the hallway. The walls were covered with old wallpaper, peeling in several places. There were doors on both sides, all closed, faded signs, preparation room, office, storage. Each step I took echoed too loudly. And then something started to happen. Flashes, images in my head. Fast, violent. I was lying down, hands crossed over the chest, flowers all around me, faces looking down, blurred, crying. I stopped in the middle of the hallway, my hand on the wall to keep from falling. My vision was blurry. My head was throbbing. I was in a coffin. The lid was open. Someone was whispering my name. No, I murmured, squeezing my eyes shut. This isn't real. But the images continued. clearer now. I could feel the weight of the flowers on my chest. I could feel the cold satin lining against the back of my neck. I could smell the sweet, nauseating scent of death all around me. And then, the worst part, I was conscious, trapped inside the coffin, unable to move, while voices around me prayed for my soul. I was screaming, but nobody heard me. I hit him, but nobody felt it. And then, the lid began to close. I opened my eyes again, gasping, sweating profusely. My whole body was trembling. I pressed my forehead against the cold wall, trying to anchor myself to reality. That didn't happen. That never happened. You're alive. You've always been alive. But deep in my mind, a voice whispered, "He is sure." I kept walking, faster now, almost running. I needed to get out of this place before I completely lost my mind. I reached the end of the corridor. There was a double metal door with an emergency exit bar. Exit. Finally, I pushed with all my might. It didn't move. I pushed again. Nothing. "Go!" I yelled, banging on the door. And that's when I heard it. Steps. Behind me. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the corridor I had just passed through. Tuck. Tuck, tuck. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued, getting louder, closer. It was as if something invisible was walking towards me. I pressed my back against the door, holding my breath. My eyes scanned the hallway, trying to see, trying to understand. Nothing, but the footsteps were here just a few meters from me. And then they stopped. Silence. I could feel it. Something was there, right in front of me, invisible. Waiting. A voice whispered,
so close that I felt the cold air brush against my face. "You promised to come back." My legs gave way. I fell to my knees, my hands covering my face, sobs escaping uncontrollably. I didn't promise anything. I didn't. And then, something touched me, cold, firm, on my temple, like fingers. I opened my eyes. There was nothing there, but a too felt. Her fingers slowly traced down my face, outlining my jawline, my neck. And then, they sank. Not in my skin.
In my memory, the images returned, more violent, more realistic. The wake, my wake. I was dead, and then I woke up, but something woke me up. I screamed. The door behind me suddenly opened, and I fell backward, hitting my back on the wet parking lot floor. Heavy rain falling, cold air filling my lungs. I was out, finally out. I lay there in the rain for a few seconds, unable to move. The cold water hit my face, my chest, soaking my clothes, but I didn't care. I just needed to feel that I was outside, that it was over. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling, and looked back. The emergency exit was open, swaying slightly in the wind, but inside, in the dark hallway, there was no one, nothing, just emptiness. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and ran to my car. I opened the door with trembling hands, got in, locked everything. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine started on the first turn. Thank God. I put the car in gear, accelerated, and drove off without looking back. The rain pounded against the windshield, the wipers barely able to keep up. I drove without thinking, just wanting distance, kilometers, as much as possible. My breathing was erratic. My whole body ached, but I was alive. I was outside. I stopped at a red light a few blocks away. I rested my head on the steering wheel, trying to calm myself. It's over. It's over. You're okay. That's when I felt it. Something in the back seat. A weight, light, but present. My blood froze. Slowly, very slowly, I raised my head and looked in the rearview mirror. There was something in the back seat. One photo, taken from a high angle, slightly blurry, like those old funeral photos people used to take as souvenirs. I picked it up with a trembling hand, and the world collapsed. In the photo, there was an open coffin. Flowers were scattered around it. Candles were lit. And inside the coffin, you. My face. My eyes closed. My hands crossed over my chest. I was died in that photo. The paper fell from my hand. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to explode. No, no, no. This isn't real. This can't be real. I picked up the photo again and turned it over. On the back, handwritten in old, shaky handwriting, Riverside Memorial Chapel, 2022. 3 years ago, the year my father died, the memories came flooding back. All of them. I had gone to his wake, alone, in the early morning. I had stayed up late, crying, talking to him. And then, something had happened. I can't remember clearly. The images are fragmented, blurry like a dream you try to hold on to, but it slips away. I had fainted, or asleep, or dead. No, impossible. I was here, alive, driving, feeling. But the voice returned, weak, coming from somewhere inside my head. You never left. My stomach churned. I pulled over to the side of the road, opened the door, and vomited on the sidewalk. I spat until there was nothing left. My body was shaking violently. I wiped my mouth, closed the door, and continued driving. I don't know where I was going. I only knew I needed to move. I needed to keep going. If I stopped, if I overthought things. At every block, I passed billboards, lampposts, and closed shops, and then I saw another funeral chapel. Across the street, small, old, lights on. My foot pressed the brake on its own. I didn't want to stop, but I did. I looked out the window. The chapel door was ajar, exactly as before, and from inside, even with the sound of the rain, even with the car engine running, I heard my name, whispered, called. It's not time yet. I floored the accelerator. The car took off, its wheels skidding on the wet asphalt. But every time I passed a chapel, every time I saw a cemetery, a funeral, I was listening. I always heard it. My name, called underground. It's been 6 months already. I don't sleep anymore. I avoid any place that smells of flowers, candles, or varnished wood. I moved to a different city. I changed my phone number. I stopped driving for Uber. But it doesn't matter where I go. Every night, when the silence becomes too heavy, I listen. Voices from beneath the ground, saying that I promised, saying that I'll be back. And the worst part, I think they're right. If you listen to the end, you're already one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next whisper.